Hi guys, so we are going to talk about water and electrolyte balance today.
The electrolyte balance in the body's fluids is absolutely crucial to many body processes, and any imbalances can cause serious disorders and can even be life-threatening. As described in an earlier program, the fluids in the body are filled with dissolved salts and minerals that take on plus or minus electrical charges and are called ions or electrolytes. The common electrolytes sodium, potassium, and calcium take on positive charges in a fluid and are called cations. Chloride, bicarbonate, and phosphate take on negative charges and are called anions. The concentration and charges of these electrolytes have a lot to do with how fluids move through the body and also how they pass through membranes into and out of cells and blood vessels. Osmosis, diffusion, and active transport are all processes of fluid transfer through membranes that are dependent on the concentrations of electrolytes. Imbalances in electrolytes can disrupt this flow of fluids and cause many pathological conditions. This program will discuss imbalances in some of the main electrolytes in the body.
So, with that being said, let's talk about this. What are electrolytes? And so, you should know it's an anion, and from the video, we know that now anions are positively and negatively charged ions, and they can be divided into what's known as cations, which if you look here, that T makes it look like a positive there. So those are positively charged atoms, where an anion is a negatively charged ion. And ions basically dissociate in water. And dissociation means that they break up from each other, right? So if I say I'm going to dissociate myself from the situation, it means I'm breaking myself off from the situation and I'm walking away. So dissociation, whenever you put something in water, say for instance salt, when you have this in water, it switches to sodium plus chlorine. And so as you can see, the bond's been broken. When they're written together, it means they're together, and when you put them in water, they break. And so they come into positive and negative atoms. So basically, they dissociate in water, and they can also conduct electricity. Now, where can they come from? They can come from things such as acids. Perfect example of this is HCl, or hydrochloric acid. They can come from bases, which is something like NaOH, which is sodium hydroxide, or they can come from salts, like the example above, sodium chloride. What is the role of water in electrolyte formation? Well, water is what? Is it polar or nonpolar? Hopefully you realize it's polar, right? And so if a molecule is polar, it means it can hydrogen bond with things. And so the hydrogen bonding helps to promote the dissociation of ions in water. Right? And basically, water and electrolytes, or more so, water loves salt. It's the idea wherever salt is, water will go. And it's through the process of osmosis. Now, this is a little shallow when I say this. So what is the relationship between water and electrolytes? That water basically falls salts is not really what's happening. Osmosis is the process of water going down its concentration gradient. So it goes from high concentration to low concentration across a semipermeable membrane. You've never heard of a water up, but you've heard of a waterfall before. And so that can give you a good idea how water moves. Well, if you have a place that has a lot of salt, essentially most of the area is going to be filled with salt. So you're not going to have as much water there. And so that's why it looks like water's going towards salt. it's really that water is moving down its concentration gradient, and the location of the salt is where water is less. It's the idea that if you have basically a whole room that's full of cups, well, if it's completely stacked with cups, you're not going to have enough room to put some more plates in there. So if it's full of salt, the salt is taking up a lot of the room, and so you don't have as much water. But if water and water is full, like if you have a room full of people, if you open a door, they're naturally going to move out of the door to an area where they have more space. And so if water can move through that membrane, it's going to be to the area where there's less water. So that's how basically water works. And that's important to know when we get here later and we start talking about how water moves in the body. Now, our body is full of compartments, and some of these compartments have more water than others. People in general have more water than others. So the first question we're going to ask ourselves, who has more water, men or women? And hopefully you said men. Men have about 63% water by weight, where women are about 52% water by weight. What can cause the difference between these percentages? Well, not only do we normally talk about, well, men are bigger, so they have more, but a big part of this, guys, is that overall, men have more muscle, women have more fat. So, fat or lipids are nonpolar, which means they exclude water. So women naturally have a percentage higher of fat than men, so they're going to exclude more water. Plus, men have more muscle mass, and muscle tissue contains a great deal of water. So that's the difference between the two. Now we're looking at, if we're looking at age, who do you think has more water? Babies, children, or adults? And that idea, guys, would be that infants actually contain the most water by weight, and they're up to about 73% water. And so when we're looking at water in the body and its dissolved electrolytes, it can be distributed in two major components. So the total body water is about 40 liters, with 60% of the body weight on average being water. And that's broken down into two different compartments, main compartments, right? You have what's known as intracellular fluid and extracellular fluid. Intracellular fluid is all the water and electrolytes that are contained within a cell or cellular membrane. And so most of the water in the body is in this intracellular fluid. About 2/3 of the total body water, or 40 liters, is here. So you have 25 liters that are in intracellular fluid. That's 40% of the body weight. Now, when we're looking at it, extracellular is essentially includes all the water and electrolytes outside the cell. Right? And so it's about 20% of the body weight, and that's about 15 liters. And so the extracellular can actually be divided into what's known as interstitial fluid. And then the other here that you're looking at is like plasma. So interstitial fluid, plasma, lymph, transcellular fluid. Are all within here, right? And this accounts for about 1/3. And when I mean transcellular fluid, This is the fluid, which is separated by the epithelial tissue in different parts of the body. So the fluid you see in the spine and the eyes, the joints, are fluid within body cavities, right? And so that's all kind of here. Interstitial fluid is that fluid that's bathing the tissues, right? Now, when we look at these fluids, the composition of the fluids in regards to its electrolytes are different. So let's look at the plasma, interstitial, and intracellular fluid. So the intracellular fluid, oops, guys, is yellow. So you can see where you see really high levels or components of the interstitial fluid that has high electrolytes are things like potassium, here, right? Magnesium, phosphates, sulfur ions in here, and proteins, right? So those are all the ones that are extremely high electrolytes in intracellular fluid. Now, when you're looking at extracellular fluid, right, what you're looking at with high concentrations of that, you can see in interstitial and blood both, you have high amounts of sodium, right? You have high amounts of calcium. The bicarbonate that's here is high. Chloride is high here, right? And so those areas that are both blood, and you can see they kind of go hand in hand there, that you can see those high levels of electrolytes in there. Now, basically, if you're talking about interstitial fluid, I just note that it's sodium, it's really low, right, in comparison to the others. Chloride is extremely low here, and the bicarbonate is as well. And we've seen how that can affect the cells. I mean, we talked about we're going to talk about buffering capabilities and why that bicarbonate is so important to help buffer the blood. In those, we have different types of molecules to help buffer inside cells. And sodium is really important outside the cell, and it's one of the things that helps trigger different components like an action potential. So the locations of these these types of ions are really important in a lot of different processes.
Our circulatory system is designed to provide each of our cells with a type of diffusion exchange practiced by simple unicellular organisms living in aquatic environments. This exchange occurs at the level of the tiniest blood vessels, capillaries, where wastes, nutrients, gases, and hormones are exchanged between the blood and the body cells. With walls only a single cell thick, capillaries are well adapted to their role of exchange. Most nutrients, oxygen, and carbon dioxide diffuse readily through capillary cell membranes. Salts and small charged molecules, including some small proteins, move through fluid-filled spaces within the capillary cell membrane or between adjacent capillary cells. Pressure within capillaries causes a continuous leakage of fluid from the blood plasma into the spaces surrounding the capillaries and adjacent tissues. This fluid, known as interstitial fluid, consists primarily of water in which nutrients, hormones, gases, wastes, and small proteins from the blood are dissolved. The exchange of materials between capillary blood and nearby cells occurs through this interstitial fluid, which bathes nearly all the cells of the body. Capillaries are so narrow that red blood cells must pass through them in single file. Consequently, blood is sure to pass very close to the capillary walls. In addition, capillaries are so numerous that no body cell is more than 100 micrometers or 4/1000ths of an inch from a capillary. These factors facilitate the exchange of materials by diffusion. It is estimated that the total length of capillaries in a human is over 80,600 kilometers, or 50,000 miles. As blood is forced through this narrow, almost endless network of capillaries, the speed of blood flow drops very quickly, further enhancing diffusion by increasing the amount of time available for the blood and cells to exchange materials.
So when we're talking about fluid moving, right, which this is really big on the lymphatic system or different, basically that fluid coming from the plasma coming out into the interstitial tissue and then being taken up by the lymphatic system. So there are two major factors that help to regulate the movement of water and electrolytes from one fluid compartment to the next. One of them is basically hydrostatic pressure, and this is what's known as the actual blood pressure. And so this is created by blood flow and the decreasing basically diameter of the blood vessels. It is a force that's used for filtration of small ions and waters through the blood vessels and into the interstitial space. So basically, as plasma is moving through into the interstitial area, this is the main way that fluid comes from the capillary walls into the surrounding tissue. Now, osmotic pressure is created by having an impermeable solute on one side of a cell or another. And a solute is something that can be dissolved in a solvent, right? And so here you might be looking at something big like glucose, say for instance, that can't easily get through a cell. So osmotic pressure is greatest when a solute concentration is highest, and water will flow into that compartment that has a higher concentration of the impermeable, basically solute. And so if you can see here, right, the predominant pressure to get the fluid from the plasma to the interstitial fluid is a hydrostatic pressure. Now, if fluid is going to return at the end of the capillaries, it's going to be predominantly because of osmotic pressure. When fluid is getting taken back in by the lymphatic system, it's predominantly due to hydrostatic pressure. And you can see in these areas, there's no one-way flow. That basically, it's an equilibrium here. So water is not overwhelmingly going in or out. And so these are the two main pressures that are involved or responsible for the movement of fluids. And so if you remember at the beginning of the semester on A&P 1, we talked a lot about like hypertonic and hypotonic solutions. So hyper and hypertonic solutions utilize osmotic pressure to work. And so, for instance, here, if you remember, hypertonic meant it had high solute, right? So in here, when water moves, water's going to leave the cells because there's such a high solution. Say, if we have a hypertonic situation happening in the blood, right? It could be that you're super dehydrated. And so basically your blood cells, if you remember, will start crenating or shrinking because water is leaving them. So what did we look at when we talked about hypertonic? This is that whole hemolysis, right? This is crenation. And hemolysis was, well, there's so much water on the outside that they start coming in, the water starts flowing into the cells and it pops them, right? So this is just a little bit about fluid movement, where fluid is going. Now, basically, there's a balance in water in your body. And so the amount that you input must equal the amount that you output to make sure that your body's balanced. And there's about 2,500 milliliters of this. Now, average intake per day or sources of water, most of it comes from beverage, about 1,500 mils. The next most abundant is through food. When you eat things like salad or iceberg lettuce, I just love iceberg lettuce, especially when it's been a really hot day outside. I can just num that completely, right? And it's because it has a lot of water. It's majority water. And so a lot of what you eat contains water. And there's a small that comes from metabolism. And remember that whole, when we're talking about the electron transport chain that goes from oxygen and gets reduced to water, about 250 mils of that every day. Now, when we go and we want to output water, there's several different sources for that as well. The most abundant, just like when we're talking about beverages is urine. About 1,500 mils of that is going to leave. You lose it through your skin and lungs, about 28% or 700 mils. Sweat is another, which is about 200 mils, and then feces is the last, about 100 mils. Now, the one that we most easily can control is something like sweating, right? When you work out, you start sweating like crazy, and essentially you can calm yourself down so that you can stop sweating. Things like urine production or fecal production, you are not directly regulating in any way, right? You have enzymes or you have hormones in your body that are controlling that. But there's nothing that you personally can do to increase it or decrease it. Or something like sweating, if it's really hot outside, you can go inside and stop that process a little bit. So that's the one that's most under control for us in terms of output.
Every living organism we know of requires water to survive. It's part of the reason we look so feverishly for water on other planets across the universe and consume it consistently every day here on Earth. So what would happen to your body if you stopped drinking water? Of course, when we say water, we're including all fluids which simply contain water, like juices, pop, or tea. Much like the desire to breathe in oxygen, thirst is a survival instinct. H2O is the most abundant molecule in the human body, making up, on average, 65% of an adult. As a universal solvent, it carries nutrients and hormones through the body, regulates body temperature, cushions our joints, and even lubricates our eyes. You produce around 1.5 liters of urine every day, with another liter lost from breathing, sweating, and pooping. So it's essential that the body replaces this liquid. The thirst center of the brain is located in the hypothalamus and is constantly using sensors in your blood vessels to monitor the amount of sodium and other substances in your body. For example, if you sweat too much, your blood volume and pressure fall. The brain then detects this change and creates the urge to drink something now. So what happens if you're unable to satisfy this thirst? The initial signs of dehydration are the obvious dry mouth, following which your urine becomes darker with a stronger odor as your body attempts to conserve more fluids. The lack of H2O then begins to affect your brain. You might feel lightheaded, have a slower response time, and decreased ability to feel pain. In fact, when you're dehydrated, your brain tissue literally shrinks. In studies observing hydrated versus dehydrated participants, the same task required more brain power and oxygen in dehydrated individuals compared to those fully hydrated. After a day or two with no fluids, you'll stop peeing altogether, have trouble swallowing, suffer from muscle spasms, and likely experience nausea. After all, your body can survive without food much longer, and attention to digestion is not a priority at this point. Eventually, victims may become delirious with severely impaired brain function. Interestingly, studies looking at elderly patients who suffer from delirium found that many are simply suffering from chronic dehydration in the first place. After even more time without water, the blood stops flowing to your skin, reducing heat loss but increasing your core body temperature. This can lead to a gray-bluish tinge to your skin. Beyond 3 to 5 days without water, and your body will begin to shut down its organs and eventually the brain. Of course, unlike the plentiful oxygen we breathe, only 2.5% of all Earth's water is fresh, most of which is locked up in glaciers, ice caps, and underground lakes known as aquifers, leaving less than 1% available for drinking. And most of this water is actually used to grow crops. Approximately 500 billion liters of fresh water is used daily for agriculture in the USA alone, with another 500 billion liters to cool electric power plants. And as our personal drinking sources become increasingly contaminated, over 783 million people on Earth are unable to access clean water. Scientists around the world are trying to find solutions to this problem, from attempts to remove salt from the ocean water, tap into underground aquifers, and creating innovative water filtration systems. If we look to space, NASA has developed technology for astronauts to turn their urine into water more pure than what we drink on Earth. But we can't just rely on science and technology. Perhaps the solution relies on us as a species to understand and contribute to this global water crisis. If you want to help in the mission to end global thirst, join in World Water Day on March 22nd. There are a lot of really amazing projects out there, like water.org or even the awesome UNICEF app, which donates 1 day of clean water to a child in need for every 10 minutes you put your phone down. We'll leave links in the description for these and other great water charities.
Okay, we'll stop talking there. So how do we regulate water input during dehydration, right? So basically what happens in our body? Well, one of the first things that you'll notice is that you'll see that the plasma volume can go down. So if it reduces 5 to 10%, right, which means there's less water, there's basically a physiological response that comes from that. The first thing is there's less water in those blood vessels, so the blood pressure is going to go down. That essentially, the granular cells in the kidneys, once the body basically signals the kidneys because of these baroreceptors that can essentially detect this change, the granular cells in the kidneys are going to activate the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone mechanism. And what that basically is that it's going to release renin. Renin is going to help release and activate angiotensin, and in the long run, it will activate aldosterone. Aldosterone or angiotensin increases here, and that will help to activate the hypothalamus, the very specific thirst center there. It's going to make you want to drink some water. The water is going to moisten the mouth, the stomach, the throat, and it stretches the stomach and intestines. It gets absorbed, and that's going to help increase plasma volume. Now, the other thing is the extracellular fluid osmolality increases. And what does that mean? Well, it becomes more like a hypertonic solution, which means more salt, less water. So the osmoreceptors in the hypothalamus from here will trigger the thirst centers. At the same time, with a decrease in saliva, it's going to make your mouth dry, and that's going to activate the thirst centers. And that's going to go through and make you basically drink water, and then it's going to help to, at the same point as the plasma volume is increasing, right? That's what's happening in the results. The amount of water that's going into the solution itself is going to increase, so that's going to decrease the osmolality. And what makes you stop drinking, because it's going to take a little bit of time for the water to actually be absorbed from the GI tract. Well, these guys in here, there's receptors that can basically in your stomach, when your stomach is stretching, and in your intestines due to the water, along with your mouth and your throat sensing the water. So that's going to, once you have enough, kind of turn off those thirst centers to make you want to drink water. So that's basically what's happening, how your body reacts to increasing water input during times of low water or dehydration. Now, what happens when you're dehydrated and your body doesn't get the water it needs right away? And essentially, it needs to regulate how much water is coming out. Well, the two things that we noticed earlier are still in play. You have the decrease in the plasma volume, right, which decreases blood pressure. That is going to basically inhibit the baroreceptors in the atria and the large vessels, like before, and it stimulates the posterior pituitary gland to release antidiuretic hormone. What that does is it's going to be targeted to the kidney, specifically the collecting ducts of the kidney, and it's going to basically increase water absorption there. Less water, you're not going to urinate as much, and more water absorption, you're going to increase your plasma volume and decrease your osmolality. Now, at the same time, you see the osmolality is increased. That means that you have more sodium in your plasma. That's going to activate the osmoreceptors in the hypothalamus to turn on the posterior pituitary gland and follow the same sequence here. Now, once the plasma volume, as you can see, less urine is not going to talk to anybody else, right? But there's this whole part of negative feedback here, right? That basically it's going to come, and once you get the blood volume, plasma volume leveled in the extracellular fluid osmolality balance, it's going to come and talk to the osmoreceptors in the hypothalamus and say, it's enough, turn off. So this is how it works to decrease urine output and try to get your blood volume and your osmolality back to normal in situations of dehydration. And so what I would say is using the two situations I just talked about, right, on your own, you can go through and talk about how this works in dehydration. And at any point, if you want to put this together and you want me to check it, you can do it for both. One side would be water input. The other side could be water. Do it with water input. Then you can do another one with water output. And then essentially what you can do is you can always email it to me to have me check it if you would like me to make sure that you're doing this correctly. So let's talk a little bit about dehydration. And so, let's see what I want to talk about. When you're talking about dehydration, this is the idea of negative fluid balance. Essentially, the extracellular fluid has a loss of water, right? And that essentially can come from other sources besides just dehydration, right? Or the idea of not drinking enough water. Sorry about that. Hemorrhaging, like severe bleeding, right, can cause you to lose plasma. Severe burns, because what your body's trying to do is the water is moving from in to out to try to bathe that tissue. So severe burns can cause it. That's why when you even with sunburn, you can start feeling like you're getting dehydrated because you're losing water to the sunburn. Prolonged vomiting or diarrhea, profuse sweating, water deprivation is what we normally think of. Diuretic abuse or endocrine disturbances can all cause water loss. A lot of times that the signs that you are dehydrated or you have this negative fluid balance is the cottony oral mucosa where it feels like your mouth is extremely dry. Thirst, dry flesh skin, or the basically oliguria, which is the reduce of urination, right? It may lead to weight loss, fever, mental confusion, hypovolemic shock, right? And loss of electrolytes. And so this is kind of what we're talking about, what's happening. And so cells, you have excessive water loss. I mean, this can happen from being outside, exercising too much, doing like an Ironman or something of that nature, right? And so you lose here water in the extracellular fluid. So essentially, it becomes more higher osmotic pressure here, which essentially, if you're just thinking about this, is there's more salt on the outside than water. So water is going to follow the salt, and so you're going to see cells shrinking. Cells are shrinking. They're not able to basically work or function in the same way. So basically, a total body water loss of as little as 1% can kind of trigger these points of being thirsty and trying to increase water.
Water is amazing. It's necessary for life to exist, makes you healthier, and it's incredibly refreshing, especially after an intense workout. But is water intoxication a real thing? Can you drink too much water? We're often told to drink around 8 glasses of water a day to stay healthy, but the honest truth is that this specific number is somewhat arbitrary and no scientific research exists to support it. Regardless, we know water is incredibly important. In fact, every organism we know of requires water to survive. Not only does it help the human body to bring oxygen and nutrients to the cells, regulate body temperatures, and aid metabolism, but it flushes waste out of the body. Sweat out too much during a sporting event, and you'll start to feel a bit woozy. 3 days without water, and you likely won't survive. So how could such an essential substance hurt us? It all comes down to the cellular level. The water you drink has very few electrolytes in it, things like sodium or potassium, especially compared to your cells. The electrolytes in your cells allow your muscles and nerves to work properly and help to control blood pressure and blood volume. Without them, your body cannot function. Now, normally, the difference in electrolyte concentration inside and outside the cell wouldn't pose a problem, because your kidneys flush out any excess water. However, the kidneys can only excrete fluid at a certain rate. This means that consuming a lot of water in a short period of time creates a large concentration difference. As a result, water is drawn into the cells in an attempt to dilute the concentration and even out the proportion of electrolytes, and this causes the cells to swell. The problem is, unlike other parts of your body, the brain literally has no room inside the skull for these newly plumped cells. This results in extreme headaches and confusion, leading to seizures, comas, respiratory arrest, and even death. So should you be worried? Not likely. Cases of water intoxication are very rare, though they do happen in extreme circumstances. Close to 1/6 of marathon runners develop mild cases in their careers, with all endurance athletes at a higher risk. This is because under the extremes of athletic stress, the body attempts to conserve water. So not only are you taking more water in, you're peeing less out. Science says, though you're not likely to suffer from water intoxication, you should drink to your thirst. It's the best indicator. Don't forget, we have a new video out every day during the Olympics, but if you can't...
So water intoxication, right? This is overhydration. It can occur when you have renal insufficiencies or rapid excess water ingestion. So basically what's happening here is you have a decrease in the osmolality, right? This can lead to things like hypernatremia, which is not enough salt. That osmosis into tissue cells then causes swelling of cells and severe metabolic disturbances, things like nausea, vomiting, muscular cramps, and cerebral edema, and possibly death. And this can be treated by giving a hypertonic saline solution. And so what we talked about here, it's the same. You get too much water coming in, right? And so you have less salt out here. Less salt means more water, right? And so basically water is coming in and it's going to swell the cells. And unlike plant cells, we don't have something to help protect against that. So in this situation, they can pop and cause problems. And this is basically how water intoxication can be so bad. Dilute urine, slightly dilute because of excess water, or a nice amount of a perfect stable amount of water is fine. But in these cases, you really have to be careful, because you'll get all of your electrolytes off balance, which can cause some devastating issues. And the second part of this lecture is going to talk about all of those. And again, so you can try this with, they had it for dehydration, now you can try it with overhydration. And again, send it to me, and I can take a look at it for you.
Edema means swelling from fluid that accumulates and is trapped in your body's tissues. Edema most commonly occurs in the feet, ankles, and legs, but any part of the body can be affected. The tissues of your body are made up of cells held together by connective tissue. The space between cells that contain connective tissue and tiny blood vessels is called the interstitium. The fluids in your body that are not inside cells are usually stored in your blood vessels and what are called the interstitial spaces, meaning not inside cells. Edema occurs when the tiny blood vessels or capillaries leak fluid into the surrounding tissue spaces. When the interstitial spaces fill with fluid, they expand and the area swells. There are two kinds of edema. In the type called pitting edema, applying pressure to the swollen area causes an indentation that persists after the pressure is released. In non-pitting edema, there is no persistent indentation after pressure is applied.
Okay, sorry about that, guys. So edema is an abnormal accumulation of that extracellular fluid. And so the factors and causes. So low plasma protein is a factor that can help help lead to this pooling of interstitial fluid, and that can happen from liver or kidney disease. There can be an obstruction of the lymph vessels. Remember, the lymph vessels or capillaries help to bring that fluid away from the tissue or that interstitial site. So that can happen due to surgery or infection. There can be increased in venous pressure, and that can be due to a venous obstruction or inflammation that can be due to damage. And so this woman's going to tell you after a really long day of working out as a nurse, she's going to kind of show you, if you can see on here, the pitting edema that she has.
Okay, so I've had several days of traveling here, and it's caused an interesting symptom called pitting edema. So I'm going to show you. You can see the imprints where my shoes have been. I've just taken them off. And then I want to show this to you. See the two little fingerprints? Those have been there for about 10 minutes. But they were deeper, so I'm going to show you here what happens. So pitting edema is edema that when you press on it like so, the pit stays there. Nice little set of fingerprints. And like I said, they can stay there for several minutes. It's just kind of a, I won't say normal thing, but it happens if you become dehydrated or have kidney problems, or I don't have kidney problems, thankfully. If you spend a very long time sitting upright, not letting the fluids in your body redistribute. So I just thought I'd show that to everyone. That's pitting edema.
So I'm going to leave it here, and then we'll be back for part 2 of this lecture. I hope you've enjoyed it.